And we'll just continue where we left off. So I should be sharing my screen now. Is everyone seeing it? Cool, perfect. All right, so I'm recording this. So if anyone jumps jumps on later, you could watch everything else from the recording. So we'll just continue where we left off. So we were looking at how to deal with outliers. So there's a outlier that's kind of skewing the scale here, and we were talking about a couple of strategies to deal with outliers, annotate them, and we are also talking about whether to use the mean and the median. I saw and So so in a couple of the plot types that I'll get to, median is usually more likely used, but we'll get to that. And then in terms of winds rising data, that's just basically cut it, using some sort of min and max to just kind of cap off the to cap off extreme values. So you look at the so you're just going to, just cut those off. So once we do that, we get something that looks a bit more usable. So we see still some outliers, and but we're able to get more of an idea of what the distribution is within here. And this was actually what most people ended up choosing in terms of showing the range. So this is very much related to scatter plot. So in a scatter plot, we're just simply showing a point for each company, and you get an idea of what the distribution is just simply by looking at the way that the points are arranged. So you get some information, but you do lose some, especially with categorical data, because it's it's all sort of lined up with one category. And there are ways to deal with this. You could jitter the points, so you would be able to still see kind of a cluster of points. So like for example, this is more clustered. These are a bit more spread out. But looking at something like a box plot is kind of a standard way of viewing these distributions. So looking at something like this, you have your median and then your interquartile range, and then sort of lines where you see the outlier. So this is what you would get just if you're looking at a box plot. And then these are a couple of strategies for dealing with outliers. So here you could see what we're doing like versus this is just sort of providing annotations of where those outliers are. So you could see that when there is a point that's higher than what's being shown on the graph, you could annotate that just by providing a note. And this is just kind of showing a couple of other techniques to show this sort of variance. So you could just use point ranges. So this is just simply showing the median and or showing the mean and the range. Someone for their homework, they actually they did something similar to this where it was a box plot, but they provided an additional layer that showed what that mean was. So that I actually found it was a very creative way of giving the viewer more information. So with a traditional box plot, you're just looking at your median, and it's a very useful tool. Like you get a lot of information from it, but one thing that you do lose is if you are just looking at a box plot like this, you don't really, you're not going to, it's not apparent what the mean would be. So what this person did was just provided an additional layer showing the mean, which was very useful. And yeah, so there's that. You could also take a traditional bar chart and just add error bars to it. So these error bars could be set to show show more information about the variance. And then this is just colored a bit more to make that a bit clearer. So in terms of last week's homework, this was one of the key things that a few people did lose points on. So were there any questions about does anyone else have any questions about how they did the assignment? So the key for something like this was when you are looking at this sort of data, when you have you have multiple cases, it's you may at some point be able to show something like an average or a median when you're if you're sort of getting to a presenting phase, if you find that really gets the point that you're trying to get across, but it's in terms of more exploratory ways. I believe for New York it was complete, and that was done. That was done previously. So, and this was to Robert Seller's question about complete cases. Okay, and that's fine. That's fine if that was done unnecessarily. Any other questions on the on question 2? So, so for question 3, it was it was similar to question 2. It was most people chose to use something like a box plot as well, although technically from the wording, a bar plot would have been fine because it was asking specifically for average, for mean, I believe. But here you could just see this is sort of using that same data and now building a box plot out of it. So we're looking at all of these companies. We're creating a new measure, revenue per employee. So here you could see that I'm doing that here. A lot of people used dplyr and plyr for that, which was very useful in terms of creating that. And then we're just simply plotting this out in a similar way that we did before, adding those geom box plot. So revenue per employee. And this is just sort of another way of looking at these sorts of distributions. So this is using the principle of small multiples, where we're looking at each industry and we're sort of getting a kernel estimate of the distribution. So you're not really going to get something like that, or you're here you get more of an idea of what the shape of the distribution is, and it's uh, for this, it definitely wasn't necessary, but this is just a way to show how, other ways that you could look at distributions. This gives you some additional information. So for some things like environmental services, insurance, you could see that there's, bimodal distributions. You could see some distributions are flatter, some are thinner. So it just gives you a bit more information. Again, not this wasn't something that was necessary for this sort of question, but this is just another way um, of solving this question. And a lot of people had creative graphs that they used. I saw a couple of scatter plots taking into account for something like this, taking into account total revenue versus revenue per employee, which I found it was very useful, adding that additional dimension. Um, but since we are looking at state data, I saw a choropleth map, which is also very useful for viewing something like this. Although the thing to note about something like that is it's something like a choropleth map. You wouldn't be able to get any information about the distribution like this. It's so something like that is meant as a kind of summary visualization. So this homework was meant to be an exercise, kind of a guided exploratory data analysis. So this data set, it's very similar to the sorts of data sets that you would see in the wild, where you have you have several cases. In this case, for this data, each case represents a company, and you're looking to, sort of derive some meaning from your data set. So, kind of by answering these questions, we were able to look at by industry, by state, see, and depending on different points of view, whether you're, working for the state, whether you're interested in employment, whether you're an investor more interested in revenue, looking at different ways of looking at the data. So, does anyone have any other questions about this homework? Cool. So this is just kind of a summary of what we've done with ggplot. So the ggplot, it's definitely the most popular visualization framework for R. And it's, in terms of visualization ecosystems, like outside of R and Python, it's one of the most well developed. It's very much based on the we mentioned the grammar of graphics, and the grammar of graphics that comes from ggplot really allows a unique way of communicating these visualizations technically. So sort of defining how you're mapping variables to aesthetics, the way that we were going through last lecture. And we'll be using this language a lot when we're talking about visualizations going forward. So, this provides a good framework for looking at visualization technically. And BigViz. Everyone on the call, has everyone had a chance to try to install BigViz? Has anyone had any issues? Okay, what sort of issues? What sort of issues did you have, Robert? Okay. Was this for dev tools? Or was this for dev tools? Okay. Okay, and Shyam, did you try to like did you attempt to install this? Then you had to restart. Okay, definitely. So yeah, try to do this as soon as possible because it's easier than than it has been because DevTools you used to have to go through a used to have to go through a process to install that. So it's DevTools you should be able to just install using install.packages. And once you have DevTools, then BigViz is installed directly from GitHub. So it's and like I mentioned in the past, um, these depended on and I believe also the RCPP package. Um, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're able to install that using install packages also. Um, but that's one of the key sort of uh, features of BigViz is it's meant to deal with these larger data sets, and it's using this what's called RCPP package. You know, it's written essentially leveraging the power of C++, which lower level allows you to more efficiently sort of work with large data sets. And for this week's homework, it's similar in format to last week's, where you're given a data set and you're asked to answer a couple of questions about them. Um, so the goal of this week's homework is to kind of deal with a larger data set and to kind of go through. Okay. Oh, that's weird, Valerie. I'll have to check out what's happening there. I added the meetup links directly from my YouTube account, so it just might be. Um, yeah, I almost never used YouTube in the past for uploading videos, so I'm sure it was something that something that's blocking people from. Yeah, I might have accidentally set it as a private video. So I'll make sure that I'll make sure that I get that straightened out. And in terms of there was a separate video going through BigViz, and it's this assignment is meant to kind of get you thinking about how to deal with larger data sets. So with larger data sets, in terms of visualization, you have to deal with things like binning and other strategies um, to to visualize a larger data set. But also just kind of starting out, the data is in separate files, so you have to deal with really collating that together. There are lots of ways of doing something like that, and really, as long as you get a data frame that has all five boroughs in one variable, in one data frame, like that'll be fine. There are ways to do that purely within R. So feel free, feel free to do something like that. That's just Robert is posting something in the chat about installing BigViz via DevTools. Um, so, so yeah, Robert is just mentioning that it was install underscore GitHub, and yeah, that's exactly what should work. Is once you have DevTools installed, it lets you install anything from GitHub repo. Like you're able to use this install underscore GitHub command, and the format is the username slash what the repo name is. So in this case, it's Hadley slash BigViz. And I think that should be in the video I posted for BigViz as well. But but yeah, so just in terms of what this homework is, meant to get you guys thinking about is, uh, there are multiple ways of dealing with data, but you you kind of run out of options when you're dealing with a larger data set. I'm sure um, uh, I'm sure in previous courses you guys may have run into situations where you're working on a project and you have code written that works, but at least for me, when I'm writing code, I'll usually work in kind of trial and error sort of way. And trial and error doesn't work when you're dealing with a large data set and it takes even if it takes minutes to run it, that's a minute per trial, and very quickly you begin uh, trying to find another way to deal with that. um, so that's really what I'm talking about here with moving the code to the data, where you kind of break apart what you're doing and kind of work with it that way. With so like this is just more kind of the sorts of things to think about when working on this homework assignment. So any more questions? Any more questions from those on right now? Facet grid is so Robert asked about using facet grid versus facet wrap. Um, it depends on if you're and I don't think I have an example offhand that would illustrate this. But I'll try to find one and maybe send it off in an announcement. But the facet grid is useful if the variable that you're faceting by, you're able to uh, like if the position of the small multiple makes sense, or I'm sorry, if the position of the small multiple, can be mapped to a variable. So I guess the way to explain it would be if you have something that's purely categorical, there's no and there's no real, it's just categorical. There's no order to it or anything. Um, and the small multiples could be in whichever format you wish. Then you could then facet wrap, just simply provides you sort of a bunch of smaller graphs, and if the order doesn't matter, it just simply makes it look um, uh, sort of like it'll tile them based on something that fits in a square basically. And with facet grid, actually, one example you could think of is if you're looking at, let's say, you have you're looking at a data set and you have an age cutoff. So maybe you have, under 40 and over 40, and you also are looking at gender. So you're looking at male or female, something like that. These they essentially give you four categories, and you could arrange a facet grid where you have male and female, and you have over 40, under 40, and you're looking at the graphs, and you're looking at your small multiples kind of in relation to um, almost what you could consider like meta axes. I'll try to find an example where, because it'll make a lot more sense if you see an example. One thing that is making me think of, though, is this is kind of a very fancy version of small multiples, but one of my favorite uh, interactive visualizations. So something like this is it's technically different. Like you would need a lot more than just facet grid to create something like this. But essentially, what we're looking at here is how wages. We're looking at different industries. We're looking at wages on this axis. We're looking at how job whether were jobs increasing or decreasing, And so that's technically what each of these spark lines is showing, but they're also arranged spatially to show, these show the highest increases, these show the highest decreases, and this is kind of a creative way of showing that kind of. So something like this would be more comparable to facet grid, where these are small multiples, but the position of the small multiples matters because it's being arranged either by high or low wage or increasing or decreasing jobs. Cool. Anyone else have any questions? Plotly does that, and obviously caveat, I work for Plotly. I think that's the only BI tool I could think of uh, that supports D3. Everything Vega is also a library that's built on top of D3, so that's another uh, kind of abstraction. And um, we'll get into some of the more sort of the tech behind all of this. But when we do get to more interactive visualizations, we won't really be thinking of it in terms of BI tools. So we'll I'll go through using Plotly, but it'll be the Plotly JavaScript library. So it'll be Plotly JS, like similar to essentially it's using it as an abstracted JavaScript library off of D3. Vega JS is very similar in that way, where it's providing its own grammar uh, on top of D3. Um, just in terms of libraries, like those are two that I could think of that are based on D3. I don't think I could think of any others, although I'll if I think of one, I could come up with it, but or I'll post them. But Vig and Plotly are the only ones that are linked to D3. It can handle real time. It's there is a streaming API that you're able to use. Is there a particular yeah? If there's a particular kind of project you're working on, feel free to send me an email offline, and or feel free to send me an email and we could deal with this offline. But it does handle real time data. Cool. Any other questions? Robert mentioned rickshaw. I actually haven't come across rickshaw. It's interesting. I'll have to look it up. Is it a JavaScript library or is it kind of a BI framework? Oh, it's a JavaScript library. Valerie, did you see and actually, I think this, do you need to have the data as part of the homework? I mean, you need to bring in the data for your, so I forget what I consolidated data. Yeah, so it's zip everything up, including the data. So I think I think I changed some things on here. So if you are using if you are using a tool outside of R to consolidate everything, then that, like if you're using another scripting language or something like that, that should provide the full CSV. If you're doing it in R though, just provide the code that you use to consolidate everything into one data frame. So so it could either be the R code itself, or just if you use another tool, just mention in the notes which tool you used. Because yeah, I also said that it's not necessary to submit it. So the yeah, there are multiple ways to do this. It is fine. No points will be lost if you do it purely in R. If you do it in R, though, so I'll maybe change the PDF and re-upload that, because the yeah, I mean, I won't get too hung up on that. It should be pretty apparent if you're doing it in R. So yeah, but just zip up everything into a single zip file. Any other questions? All right, so I'll still be on for office hours on Thursday, and to catch anyone who wasn't able to jump back on this one. And so if you guys have any questions, feel free to jump on then. Valerie asked and I'll post something in the discussion forum. I had a scheduling conflict for a couple of Tuesdays, so I didn't want to have a standing office hours invite for Tuesday. Um, so uh, I'll keep that. If there is a need for office hours, email me and I could schedule one, and I'll put out an announcement with when that is. But I didn't want to have the scheduling conflicts I had.